Once upon a time, there lived a man who had 7 days to find a girlfriend. His name was Chuka, and he was still single at 37. Chuka had a great job and lived in the choicest part of town. In fact, his monthly income was way more than what people earned in a year. Chuka was so handsome and rich, he spent all his time at work, leaving little to no time to his social life. All the women he dated in the past left him because they were fed up of waiting for a man who loved his work more than he loved women. Chuka did not cheat. He did not lie or even know how to quarrel properly. However, he had one problem that chased every woman away from him. Chuka was always busy chasing tomorrow. Meetings in the morning, conference calls at night, emails that arrived like mosquitoes refusing to allow him rest. At first, the women admired his ambition, but slowly, admiration turned into loneliness as their birthdays were forgotten. Date nights postponed, and evil romance began to look like a scheduled appointment on his calendar. So, one by one, they packed their bags and walked out of his life, leaving him to marry his job. Chuka did not even care. He saw relationships as distractions, especially at this point of his life. When he was finally approaching the peak of his career, however, his dear mother did not share his view. At 37, she couldn't understand why her first son was still single. His friends were all married with children, while Chuka did not even have a single girlfriend. She called him a week to Valentine, asking if he would make it for her birthday dinner, which happens to be on Valentine's Day. Chuka stuttered for a moment, knowing that his singleness was going to be the topic of discussion at the dinner. He made a comment to assure his mother that he was no longer single. "I'll bring my girlfriend to the dinner," he said as his mother began to dance in excitement. "What's her name? Where is she? How did you both meet?" His mother asked curiously as he assured her that all her questions will be addressed at the dinner. He hung up the call as his chest began to beat faster than a drum. Chuka had no girl in his life. In fact, all the women he once dated. We are now married, and Chuka did not know what to do. He arrived home hours later confused as he wondered how he was going to find a woman in a week. He called his friend, panicking as he narrated all that happened to him. I laughed hysterically as he teased Chuka, reminding him how all the women he had dated in the past. We are all married with kids. It seems once you date a girl, someone else wives her up, he said to Chuka, who told him to be serious for once. I need a girlfriend before Valentine, and I don't even know where to start, he said to Ao, who informed him of a new gym in town, where beautiful men go in search of your husband. If you see the number of beeps at this gym, I said dramatically as Chuka rolled his eyes and asked for the location of the gym. He was so desperate, and desperation, as you know, has a way of making even the most serious man listen to foolish advice. The next morning, for the first time in years, stepped into a gym to find a woman. He wore a brand new tracksuit that still smelled like the packaging that he came in. Women stretched gracefully around him, while Chuka stood there confused, holding dumbbells like a clueless chicken. Within 10 minutes, he realized that the gym girls were not looking for stressed-out uncles like himself, who was breathing like a generator after 5 push-ups. The only lady who smiled and spoke to him informed him that he was using the leg press machine wrong. Her friend laughed loudly as they both whispered something between themselves and walked away. Chuka left the gym that day, feeling more single than before. In fact, if singleness had a certificate, the gym girls would have stamped it on his forehead. He sat in his car, sweating like a man who had just fought for Nigeria's independence. Chuka started his engine and drove home, with a kind of shame that makes a man remove his wristwatch as if time itself was offending him. When he got home, he stood in front of his mirror and looked at his face like it was the face of someone who had lied to his mother without thinking. So this is how a 37-year-old CEO will be searching for love everywhere, he muttered to himself. Then he opened his fridge, saw his imported yogurt and granola. Chuka realized something painful in that moment, that he had built a life so polished that there was no space for softness. Even his kitchen looked like it was afraid of romance. Chuck had that night sat up in bed, unable to sleep. His mother's voice kept playing in his head. "This Valentine's dinner will be the happiest Valentine of my life," she had said, mentioning his late father with that quiet ache that mothers carry like a bag. And then she added the final weapon. "Your younger brother is bringing somebody home to introduce to us." Ah, that sentence entered Chuka's body, and began to do press-up, because his younger brother was the type that always made family proud with minimal effort. Obina could be broke today and still have a fiancé tomorrow. Meanwhile, Chuka had money that could sponsor an entire local government, but he had no woman to hold his hand at dinner. He tried to sleep, but sleep refused to enter his house. The pillows were soft, but his thoughts were sharper than the edge of a new razor. He rolled from left to right, unable to sleep as he pleaded for God to help him. Morning came, and Chuck had decided to speak to his friend again. He called on the phone and began to rant. "Bro, I went to the gym." "Oh," he confessed as I began to laugh at him hysterically. "True. So, because of woman, you carry yourself into gym. This one don't they turn serious matter?" he said as Chuka groaned. "I'm serious," he said as I cleared his throat and began to speak. "Bro, there's this group online called Faceless Rant where people rant and pour out their frustrations. People create fake pages and rant as much as they want. Why don't you create a fake page and rant on there? Maybe you'll find love there, as so many women go there to rant about being single," he said to Chuka, who was already checking the page out. He immediately created an anonymous account. No profile picture, no real name, just a username that sounded like pain. Overworked Bachelor 37, and that was it. Chuka began to type out his frustrations. "I have 7 days to find a girlfriend to take home," he wrote. "My mother thinks I have a +1. If you see me in the hospital on Valentine's Day, just know that it is family pressure that wants to kill me." So many comments flooded the post sympathizing with him, and some women even threw themselves at him, pleading for him to marry them. Chuka was so put off by this, he decided to take down the post, when suddenly a specific comment caught his attention. It was from an anonymous account that stated that she was willing to be his +1 if he agreed to also be her +1 for a wedding the week after Valentine. Chuka immediately agreed as they both exchanged contacts privately and decided to speak. That same night, Chuka called up her number. He was so desperate and could not wait to seal his plans. Their first call was awkward at first, like two strangers who were sharing a seat in a public gathering. However, Lola had a way of easing tension with humor. "So what is your plan? How will we lie?" she asked Chuka, who laughed and began to speak. "We not call it a lie. We will call it packaging." Lola laughed as Chuka suggested that they tell their families that they met at the cinema. Lola merely screamed, "Cinema? Who goes to the cinema alone?" She teased as Chuka, with full confidence, revealed that he does me. Lola paused. "You a hoe you." Chuka began to explain how he once went alone, slept halfway, and woke up to someone tapping him like he was a generator that had refused to start. Lola laughed so hard that she began to cough. And for the first time in a very long time, Chuka had genuine laughter and realized that he missed it more than he missed money. Over the next few days, they spoke like people rehearsing for a stage. They asked each other serious questions: favorite food, siblings, childhood stories, how they will behave around elders. Lola coached him on Nigeria family politics. "If your auntie asks you when you marry, don't say so no. Say God's time," she warned as true practiced. "God's time," he repeated like a student. Lola also practiced her own lines. She asked for details about his mother because she did not want to accidentally say something that would ruin their entire plan. Days passed, and the two decided to meet physically to get their stories right. When Chuka saw Lola in person, he froze in complete shock. Lola was not just beautiful, she was magnetic, the kind of woman who could make any man stutter. Chuka felt his confidence shake as she approached him. Lola smiled and told him to relax. "We are teammates," she said as his smile called beautifully on her lips. And somehow Chuka found himself calming down. Their first meeting turned into unexpected bonding. They sat in a restaurant and laughed like two people who had known each other for years. Chuka tried to be serious, but Lola kept making jokes. "So you want to tell your mother that we met at the cinema? Hope you also revealed to her that I caught you snoring." Chuka laughed as he pleaded with her to leave that part out. "Maybe we should leave that part out." To Lola leaned forward. "No, you must put it. Make it sound like destiny. He was sleeping and I woke him up. That's romance." Chuka laughed so hard, he was surprised at how easy it was to laugh with her. They talked about movies, and Lola confessed that she loved romantic films, but pretended not to. Chuka confessed that he liked cartoons, but acted like a serious adult. They both spoke for hours, and Chuka could not deny the strong connection that he felt. However, he did not want to jinx anything, seeing that Valentine's Day was the next day. Finally, the day arrived and Chuka drove to Lola's house with flowers and a gift. His heart raced as he knocked on her door. Lola opened her door as she smiled and took the gifts from his hand. Chuka forgot how to breathe. In that moment, Lola was dressed beautifully, not in a loud way, but in a soft, elegant way that made him suddenly remember that he was actually a man. She smiled at the flowers as she looked him in the eyes and began to speak. "Ah, so you're romantic like this." Chuka cleared his truth. "It's part of the plan." Lola laughed. They got into the car and drove to his family house. When they arrived, his mother's face lit like Nipa had finally brought light. "My son," she screamed. Then she saw Lola and screamed again. "Jesus, who is this beautiful woman?" she asked her son, who smiled and introduced Lola to her as his woman. His mother could not contain her joy as she led them into the house, where the dining table had been set with numerous dishes. The dinner started beautifully as Chuka's mother held Lola's hand and kept staring at her as if she might just disappear. "So, you are the beautiful woman that captured my son's heart," she said proudly as Lola smiled swiftly and replied, "Yes, ma'am," she said as she looked at Chuka, whose heart was now racing his chest. As they all sat there happy, the door opened as Chuka's brother, Obina, arrived with his fiancée, Omi. The moment he saw Lola, his face changed like someone who was just seeing a ghost. Chuka noticed a change immediately as he stared at Lola, who seemed to now be uneasy. "Lola," Obina said slowly. The whole room fell silent as Lola's throat moved as she swallowed. "Do I know you?" Lola asked carefully as Obina smiled and took his seat. The smile on his lips was that of someone who was about to drop a time bomb. Obina asked Lola in that moment if she had come to wring the life of his brother. Everyone stared at them confused as Obina began to narrate the whole story to them. "This woman right here abandoned my best friend Casey on the altar." Chuka's mother's face twisted as her ears stood up like a radio antenna. "Lola here left my friend Casey on their wedding day. All because of a married man. She even ended up having a child for the married man." The entire room fell silent as Chuka's heart began to race. Lola's eyes widened, her mouth open, but no words came out. Chuka looked at her hoping she would clear the air and revealed that it was a mistake. But Lola's face was already breaking in that moment. "It's not like that," Lola whispered as everyone looked at her with judging eyes. Chuka sat there confused as his brother continued to speak. "She will spoil your life." "Oh," he said to his brother, who he told that Lola was not a wife material. That sentence cut deep as Lola stood up abruptly, her tears scraping the floor as her hands began to shake in fear. Tears pulled quickly in her eyes, the kind that came from shame and not from sadness. Lola looked at Chuka once, like someone who was begging without words. Then she turned and ran out of the house. Chuka stood up immediately and ran after her, but by the time he reached outside, she had already entered the cab and zoomed away. "Lola!" Chuka shouted as the cab driver zoomed off. Chuka stood there helpless as he watched the cab disappear into the Lagos night. When he returned inside, his mother pulled him aside and began to speak. "Chuka," she said firmly, "you will not be with a woman like that. Not after your father's death. I will not allow scandal enter this household." Chuka nodded, but his heart was not nodding because something in him refused to accept that Lola was just a headline. He remembered her laughter, her careful questions about his family, her kindness, the way she did not ask for money. A woman who wants to destroy you does not enter your life with dignity. Yet the embarrassment of the dinner hung on him like smoke. That night, Chuka could not sleep again. He sat on his couch staring at his phone as he called her number over and over again, but Lola did not pick up his calls. He sent several messages asking if she was fine, but Lola did not also respond. Chuka drove to her house and parked outside. He rang a bell repeatedly, but Lola did not open the gate. So, Chuka waited there like a foolish man. Hours passed, and finally Lola came out of the house to meet with him. She had seen him from her window and expected that he would leave when she refused to open the gate. However, hours passed, and Chuck had remained there like a man on a mission. Lola stood at the gate quietly, her arms folded across her chest like someone who was trying to hold herself together before she finally fell apart. The street lights above them flickered, and for the very first time, Chuka noticed how tired her eyes looked. Not the tiredness of someone who lacked sleep, but the tiredness of someone who had been running away from a story that refused to let her rest. "What do you want, Chuka?" she asked softly, her voice careful, as if any loud sound might break her in two. Chuka swallowed hard as he began to speak. "I came to hear your own side of the story," he said gently. "Not Obina's version. Yours." Lola took a deep breath as she began to tell her story. "The married man everyone is talking about was actually my first love. We were together for 12 years. She continued quietly. 12 years, Chuka, from when I was still in university. He promised me marriage every single year. He even met my family, and my mother began to call him her son. Everybody knew us as that couple that would eventually get married." Her voice cracked slightly as she paused for a moment and continued to speak. "I didn't know he secretly got married," she added quickly. "Not until it was already too late. He moved away from Lagos, claiming that he got a new job in Patakat. He even visited every month to reassure me that he was still serious to marry me. Little did I know that he got married and kept his wife there in Patakat. I loved him so much and never had any reason to doubt." Chuka felt something twist inside his chest as Lola wiped her tears and continued to speak. "When I got pregnant, he swore he would marry me immediately. That was when everything began to fall apart. I decided to pay him a surprise visit in Patakat to tell him about my pregnancy when I realized that he was married to another woman. He had a whole wife, Chuka, a woman that I never knew existed." Lola laughed bitterly as tears poured down her eyes. "I felt like my life had been stolen from me." Chuka moved closer, but he did not touch her. He allowed her space to speak. "I tried to leave him," she continued. "But you know how it is when someone has been your entire world for years. It's not easy just to disappear. That was when Casey came into my life." She paused, looking down at her hands. "Casey was kind, patient, everything that my ex was not. He loved me loudly and proposed a few months after we met. And for the first time, I felt that maybe God was giving me a second chance at life." Juka listened carefully as Ola paused as he replayed the scenes in her mind. "So, why did you leave him at the altar?" he asked softly as Lola's body stiffened. "Because my past refused to let me go," she whispered. She took another breath before continuing. "My ex found out I was finally moving on, so he lost control. He called me one night and threatened that if I went ahead with the wedding, he would release every private video that he had of me." Chuka's eyes widened slightly. "He said he will send them to everyone, my family, my workplace, my husband, the entire internet," Lola continued, her voice shaking. "He said that he will make my life very miserable." Silence fell between them like a heavy blanket. "I was terrified to her," she admitted. "I couldn't tell Casey and was so ashamed of myself. I thought if I married him, that would destroy his life, too. So on the morning of the wedding, I ran." Her shoulders shook slightly as tears fell freely from her face. "I didn't run because I love the married man," she added quickly. "I ran because I was scared. I thought disappearing would protect everyone." Chuka exhaled slowly, the weight of her words settling into him. "And the child?" he asked gently. Lola nodded. "Yes, I had a child from that relationship. That part is true, but nobody knows the full story. People only know headlines. Nobody knows the threats. Nobody knows the fear I felt." She looked up at him finally, eyes filled with vulnerability. "I never told you because I didn't want to drag you into my mess," she whispered. "You are just supposed to be a +1, a safe arrangement, nothing more." Chuka stayed quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke softly. "You are protecting yourself, and there's nothing wrong about that," he said. Lola gave a small tired nod. "I thought if people hated me, it would be easier than explaining everything," she admitted. Chuka felt his chest tighten. "All this time," he said slowly, "you are carrying this alone." Lola smiled sadly. "People only comfort victims they understand. My story is too complicated, so they turn me into a villain instead." The night breeze moved between them gently as Chuka stepped closer and looked her in the eyes, his voice steady as he continued to speak. "Lola, you didn't destroy Casey's life. You protected him the only way you knew how. Lola blinked at him, surprised by the absence of judgment in his voice. And you didn't lie to me, he added quietly. You just didn't trust that I could handle the truth yet. Lola looked down as tears slipped quietly down her cheeks. I thought after that dinner that you would disappear too, she confessed as Chuka smiled faintly. I almost did, he admitted honestly, but something inside me refused to believe that your entire life could be reduced to one accusation. Silence fell again, but this time it felt softer. What happens now? Lola asked quietly as Chuka took a slow breath. Now, he said gently, you stop running, and this time you don't fight alone. We fight this together, he said as Sola looked up at him shocked. She did not know what to make of his statement, seeing that they were only together to help each other out. However, something inside her wished that this was real, that Chuck Hadda felt something for her, as she could not deny that she was already falling for him. She stood there expectant as Chuka reminded her of the wedding that he was to escort her to as a +1. It was the next week, and Chuka looked at her gently as he revealed that it would be an honor to be her +1. Lola blinked slowly, almost like she did not believe what he had just said. After everything that happened at your house, she asked softly, your family already thinks I'm trouble. You don't have to do this again. Chuka, she said as Chuka shook his head and insisted on going with her. The wedding day they arrived faster than either of them expected. Lola stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her dress with hands that trembled slightly. Weddings had once been a joyful space for her, but now they felt like stages where people came to measure her mistakes. When Chuka arrived to pick her up, he noticed the nervousness in her eyes. You look beautiful, he said softly to her. Zola smiled and said to him, you always say that when you don't know what else to say. Chuka laughed lightly. No, I say it because it's true. When they arrived at the wedding venue, the atmosphere was loud, colorful, and filled with relatives who knew how to gossip better than they knew how to greet. Lola barely stepped out of her car before two women approached them, her half-sisters whose names were Ada and Mina, their smiles sharp as they began to speak. Ah, Lola, Ada said loudly, and not for nearby guests to hear. So he came with another man again. Hope this one is not somebody's husband, too. Mina laughed, covering her mouth dramatically. Maybe married men, just like her body. It's magnetic. A B. She kept her head down, clearly used to swallowing humiliation without uttering a word. Ada turned to Chuka. Mr. Man, you better run. No, because this woman here specializes in collecting other people's husbands. Today is you. Tomorrow to be another person. Laughter repelled around them like dry lips as Chuka's jaw tightened. At first, he tried to stay calm, but something inside him snapped. Enough, Chuka said firmly as their laughter died instantly. Everyone turned to look at him. Chuka stepped forward slightly, his voice calm but heavy. You people think that you know her story because you heard one side, he said, but the Lola I know is stronger kinder and more dignified than all of this noise that you're making. Ada folded her arms. I see lover boy you, she don't cast spell on you too. Chuka did not even blink. You are mocking a woman who survived more than you can imagine. He continued, and instead of asking questions you choose to insult her. That alone tells me everything about your character. The crowd fell silent as Ola stared at him stoned. Chuka's voice softened slightly as he turned towards her. This woman right here, he said slowly, has more grace in her silence than many people have in their loudness. Men scoffed, but no one laughed this time. And if we're talking about personality, Chuka added firmly, none of you here can match her. Everyone opened their eyes in shock as Chuka held Lola's hands and began to speak. I'm not here because of pity, he said. I'm here because I know her story and I have chosen to stay. I love you, Lola, with all of my heart, and no amount of noise will be able to put a wedge between us, he said to Lola, who stood there speechless as she tried to understand if Chuka was acting or being real. No one spoke again as her half-sisters found their way to their seats. The rest of the wedding passed in a strange silence as some guests avoided them, whilst others watched them like they were part of the entertainment. Lola barely said a word until they entered the car afterwards. As soon as the door closed, she turned to him with a small smile. Wow, she said softly. Your acting deserves an award, though. Chuka looked at her and revealed that he was not acting. Nola blinked confused. You mean you are not just offending me because of the agreement? She asked as Chuka shook his head slowly. I meant every word I said. He confessed. At first, this started as packaging, but somewhere along the way, you stopped being a plan and became someone I genuinely want in my life. Silence filled the car as Lola stared at him shocked as she searched his face for a sign of pretense. But Chuka was not joking. He professed his love to Lola, revealing that he had fallen deeply in love with her. Lola, he said softly, turning fully towards her. I don't want to pretend anymore. I don't want to be your plus one or your teammate. I want to be your man. I want you to be my woman, the one that I'll protect from the world. Lola's lips parted slowly, her breath catching in her chest. She had rehearsed many endings in her head, but this was not one of them. She searched his eyes again, waiting for the punch line that never came. You mean it? She whispered as Chuck and nodded gently. I don't rush things, he said honestly, but I know what peace feels like. And when I'm with you, I'm at peace. Tears gathered in Lola's eyes again, but this time they were not heavy with shame. They were soft, uncertain tears. That kind of comes when someone finally chooses you without fear. The next morning, Chuka drove straight to his mother's house. He didn't call her ahead. He didn't rehearse his speech. He simply walked in like a man who had made a decision that would not be reversed. His mother looked up from the kitchen in surprise. Through, you are here this early. Hope no problem, she said to Chuka, who sat down and narrated the whole story to her. Not the gossip version, not Obina's version, no last truth. He explained about the 12-year relationship, the betrayal, the pregnancy, the threat, the fear that made her run from her wedding. His mother's face changed slowly as she spoke. The anger she once carried melted into something softer. I judged her too quickly, she admitted quietly. Ah, that girl suffered though. Chuka nodded. She did, Mama, and she carried it alone for far too long. His mother sighed deeply as she sat beside him. If that wicked man ever comes near her again, what will you do? Chuka smiled faintly. Mama, leave that one to me, he said as he assured his mother that he had a plan. Weeks passed quietly, and Chuka began to make time for Lola. He was so deliberate about her as he always showed up for her, listened and did everything to make her happy. Slowly the life he once built around work began to soften as Chuka created a balance that seemed to work. Everything was going on well till one evening when Lola received a call that made her hands to shake. It was her ex. His voice crawled through the phone like an old poison. So you have a new man now, he said coldly. Don't forget I still have things that can destroy you. Lola froze, but before fear could swallow her whole, Chuka gently took the phone from her hand. Hello, he said calmly. There was a long P on the other end. Who is this? The man asked sharply. Someone who knows more about you than you think. Chuka replied quietly. Weeks earlier, without making noise, Chuka had hired a private investigator, not to fight dirty, but to understand the man who had held Lola hostage with fear for years. The investigator had uncovered secrets about him. The report was detailed, neat, and heavy with the kind of truth that could shatter a man's image forever. According to the findings, Lola's ex had not married for love. He had married for access to money, power, and a future he did not deserve. The company he worked for belonged to his wife's father, a respected businessman who trusted him like a son. The old man praised him in public, introduced him to investors, and quietly began preparing him as the man who would inherit the family empire. But behind the polished suits and fake humility, the investigator uncovered silent theft. Millions siphoned slowly through shell accounts, documents altered carefully, transactions hidden under projects that did not exist. Secrets that if exposed would not only earn him jail time, but ruin his life forever. Shakar's voice remained steady as he told him all his secrets. You see, people who threaten others usually forget that they also have things to hide. Silence filled the call. I don't want war, Chuka continued calmly. But if you ever threaten Lola again, your own story will not remain private, he said as he hung up the call. Lola stared at him shocked as she wondered what had happened. She stared at Chuka, who smiled and assured her that her ex would no longer be a problem. You saved me, she whispered as Chuka smiled softly. Months later, on a quiet evening, Lola sat beside him on his balcony. watching the Lagos lights blink like tiny promises across the sky. Her life was no longer defined by whispers. His life was no longer defined by emptiness. And somewhere between a fake plan and a real confession, two strangers who once met as plus ones became partners who chose each other over fear. Because sometimes love does not arrive in perfect packaging. Sometimes it begins as an arrangement and slowly grows into a promise that no past, no gossip, and no threat can break. The lesson to be learned from this story is that not every person who walks away is guilty, and not every loud noise carries the truth. Many people carry silent wounds that shape their decisions, and judging them without understanding only deepens their pain. Life also teaches that pretending to be strong alone can keep you trapped in fear. But allowing the right people to stand with you can change your entire story. Sometimes what begins as convenience or coincidence becomes destiny, reminding us that healing often comes when two imperfect people choose honesty, growth, and grace over pride and assumptions. I hope you enjoy.